You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in. We were really
a Mamamia podcast.
Today, you're going to hear a story about a family. My family. A family just like 500,000 other families around Australia. A family with 2 people in it who have an intellectual disability. And like so many others, the story of our family is full of love and challenges and heartbreak and humour. You may have noticed by now that this voice does not belong to Mia Friedman, but you are listening to No Filter, an interview podcast from Mamamia with people who tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. My name is Jessie Stevens, and I'm the Assistant Head of Content at Mamamia. My twin sister, Claire Stevens, is the Editor-in-Chief here. And you might also know my voice from Mamamia Out Loud or True Crime Conversations, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to introduce this episode of No Filter and set the scene for you a little bit before Mia gets to the interview. Our whole lives, Claire and I and our brothers have grown up alongside our cousin Simon. Simon is 35 and he has an intellectual disability. And so does his mother, our auntie Michel, who is 63. We talk about Michel and Simon all the time here at Mamamia. They're a huge part of our lives and 2 of our favourite people in the world. They're funny and they're warm and they're interesting. They're who we sit with on Christmas and they're who we call when we've had a bad day. They listen and they make us laugh. Simon's favourite thing in the world is musicals. He calls me most nights and asks when the next show is. Here's me on the phone to Simon over the weekend. Going to a show?
When's that?
Well, when lockdown is finished, we'll go straight away, I promise. Yep, we'll go and see something. You choose.
Yeah.
He likes to plan dinner, what snack we might get at intermission, and what time he'll be getting home. Michel loves weddings. Right now, she really, really wants my twin sister and I to be brides. She even bought Claire a wedding dress from Vinnie's last year. And look, your first question is probably this one. Why isn't it Michel and Simon telling their own story? And that's a valid one. The nature of both Michel and Simon's intellectual disabilities means that they're unable to tell their own stories, at least in the context of a podcast. You will hear their voices in the episode though, and they both consented to this podcast being made. There are, of course, some questions only they can answer. So this episode will be mostly from the perspective of a family who has raised 2 people with intellectual disabilities. A few weeks ago, Mia sat down with the 3 people who really know and love Simon and Michel. That's my pop, my dad Pete, and my other auntie Elissa. So, just to be clear, Pop, his name is Phil, and my gran, who died 15 years ago, they had 4 kids. Dennis, and then Michel, Pete, and Lisa. Michel was born with an intellectual disability and she went on to have a son of her own, Simon, who also has an intellectual disability. And my pop, who you're going to hear from today, he is 94 and is Simon's primary carer. Michel lives independently in an apartment with her own full-time carer. She loves her independence and you're going to hear more about that too. I know there are a lot of names to remember, but what you really need to know is that Michel and Simon are surrounded by love and a very close family. This isn't a simple story though, and it's why we wanted to share it. Hundreds of thousands of families in Australia are living and dealing with some of the issues you're going to hear my family talk about today. Issues around consent and sex and having babies and independence and romantic relationships, the fear of exploitation and the desire to support the decisions of people you love while at the same time protecting them. But, and it's important you know this, our family wouldn't change any of it. We are so lucky. One more thing before I hand over to Mia. I'm just going to add a little disclaimer. Our family has been talking about and living with and alongside intellectual disability for 63 years. The words used when Michel was born are no longer used today, and for good reason. At points throughout this interview, there may be words or phrases that are not the most correct, and it might come as a bit of a shock to hear them. They're words like special or normal or even handicapped. But it's how the people who love and care for Michel and Simon speak, and it reflects the context in which they learned about their disabilities. They're still learning and I'm still learning. So what I'm asking you to do is listen with an open mind and an open heart. Okay, enough from me. Here's Mia sitting down with Michel's father Philip, her brother Peter and her sister Lisa.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Pop, Pete and Lisa. Pop, I want to start with you. How many kids did you have when Michel was born? Was she your eldest?
Yes, she was, yeah. Other than Dennis, who was our stepson.
So you had Michel. How was the pregnancy and the birth? When did you know that something might be a bit different?
A month or two, I think, before Michel was actually born. My wife had some problems with a prolapse cord. Before she was due to be born, she had a prolapse cord, and then, of course, that meant she had to have a caesarean because it cut off the oxygen. It was thought perhaps that was the cause of her problems. But in the long run, I think they decided it wasn't. It was something that was in her.
I mean, if she was your eldest, you didn't have anything to compare her to after she was born.
No.
When did you first kind of notice that maybe things were a little bit different with Michel?
Well, she was slow to learn anything, but it became evident after a few months, that she wasn't picking some things up.
Pete, you were next. How old was Michel when you were born?
Well, if you ask Michel, she keeps on reminding me that she's 18 months older than me. So she remembers that. Yeah.
Most firstborns aren't that thrilled when the second comes along.
Yeah, so.
As you grew up, you obviously only had one older sister. What was your relationship like?
Look, I can't remember the relationship before we went to school. There's just a couple of memories, but I think Michel became a big part of my life when we were both going to the same school. We went to a primary school in Janali, and Michel was different at that school, and she copped a bit from kids, and so therefore I made the mistake of trying to protect her and had a few fights and lost them all.
Pop, you sent Michel to a regular mainstream school, and then did it become clear that maybe she needed to go somewhere else?
Yes, it did.
Mum realised quite early on that she probably needed to move her, and Mum was really good because she said it wasn't just for Michel's needs, but she could also see that it was impacting on the learning of the other children as well. So Minerva Street was the next spot, and then I believe you went overseas to Honolulu, and she went to a school there with Japanese children who were beautiful to her. But again, that was a mainstream school, and it was very evident that she wasn't going to cope. And when they came back, I think is when you put her in at Mater Day at Narellan.
And Lisa, you came along when?
So Michel was 6 when I was born.
Yeah.
And I just had really good memories because I actually didn't know there was anything wrong with her because she was older. And it was only probably when I knew that when we played a game she'd get disinterested very quickly, and she was quite temperamental, wasn't she? She had a bit of a temper.
How much older than you was she?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
And then Pete was about
four
or five.
Yeah. And so, I had a different experience, and I didn't know there was anything wrong with her till I was at school one day in about year 1, and this nun said to me, what's it like having, I think we used the handicapped sister. And I went, oh. And I went home and I said, I didn't know she was handicapped, but Mum assumed I did. But she was just my sister.
Pop, back in those days, we're talking about the 60s. Was there much government assistance or support or anything for people who had children with disabilities? Or did you have to do it all yourself?
No, I can't remember. We didn't need much really, but But she went to Sydney University for quite some time
Michel
in the
did.
care of a doctor, just as a patient, if you like. And this doctor was trying to find out the problem. Very good she was. But there was nothing treatable there, you know. Anyhow, we were very impressed with that lady.
So there were some people that you saw from time to time
Oh,
that
yes.
sort of helped you out.
Yes, there were. Another student used to come out there, didn't she? And I forget what she did. She just
Like support.
yeah, probably, and part of her own training, I think. Yeah.
And Pop, you were a pilot for Qantas.
Yeah.
So you're away a lot, I imagine, and
Yeah.
a lot of the caring
Yeah,
and
well,
bringing
that's
up.
it. See, I missed a fair bit of it.
So
Yeah,
your wife,
My wife had to carry the lot.
Pete and Lisa, what were your memories of that time? Like growing up, as Michelle got older, did she kind of want more independence as she got further into her teens? Did she want to go out more, socialise more?
Yeah, so I was away and I was at boarding school, but I do remember Michelle wanted to be independent. She wanted to have, her freedom. And I've always, growing up with her, she's always, when things didn't go, she didn't have that freedom. She'd always say, "This is not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair," and she could actually hold a conversation for a little while. So people were interested in it for a little while, and so she thought, "Oh, well, I'm okay," but then she would be let down by these people. But you wanted to protect her because you knew that if she kept on going out, she'd meet it with disappointment. And it was interesting. I mean, during my years, what I do remember about her friends were her boyfriends. I remember one night Michelle was with this fella called Charlie, and Michelle said, I was in my room and I could hear her outside, and she said to Charlie, "I don't want to go out with you anymore." And Charlie said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because I don't like the way you kiss." And that was it. Never saw him again. But that was the great thing about Michelle. She's as honest as the day was born. If she came in here and she didn't like you, she'd say, "I don't like you." But Michelle was very, very honest and had lots and lots of boyfriends because she was attractive and had all different characters, didn't she, Lisa?
She certainly did.
That's an interesting thing, the idea of people with additional needs and people who are intellectually disabled also are sexually active.
Yeah.
And Lisa, do you remember your mum telling you what happened?
Yeah, so Mum had concerns about contraception, and she did sort of research about the idea of her being put on contraception. So there was a discussion there. But it didn't matter anyway because at the end of the day, we had no rights in that respect. So Michelle was allowed to conceive, and if we were seen to interfere with that in any way, it would be seen to be discriminatory, which was ironic because when Simon was born, Michelle was not going to be able to take him home.
So how old were you both when Michelle got pregnant?
I was about 20.
26.
So she got pregnant. Was that unexpected, or it was more like, well, this was always probably going to happen. What do we do now?
It was unexpected to us, really.
Well, she was married. She'd married this chap.
Yeah, she's married to Ron, yeah.
Yeah, so she got married, Pop. Do you remember how that came about?
Well, she just met this chap where I don't remember.
How old was she? Do you remember?
24.
24,
Yeah,
25.
about 24, but she'd had boyfriends, these other fellas before.
How did you feel about her getting married?
Well, we didn't think that she could do it, but
She was
she had the
legally
right.
allowed, yeah?
But within 3 months she'd walked out. By the time she was pregnant, and she walked off with some other fella, went up the mountains or somewhere. But that was she had this, has always had it, that she needed somebody who was hers. That was the reason for marriages and for engagements, if you like. That person belonged to her until it didn't suit her.
And Pete and Lisa, I imagine that there was some sort of family consternation. Do you remember the wedding?
Oh, yeah.
I remember the wedding.
The first wedding?
And it was, I think Michelle met Ron at Belmore Park.
Yeah.
And there was a church there called the Church of Open Skies.
The preacher was there.
Yeah, the preacher was there. So the preacher then came over and met with the family and said they should get married. And obviously we said, no, that's not a good idea. I think there was a little bit of tension there, Dad, as I remember, between Dad and the priest and myself. Well, I don't know whether he's a priest or a religious fella.
So the priest wanted her to get married because
Yeah.
he knew that they were being sexually intimate.
No, I just think he wanted to get married because he wanted to have a church. He's a bit strange, this fella.
Yeah.
He just
Yes.
wanted to have a wedding in his church.
Except the church was Belmore
Didn't
Park.
have a building.
was
It
a
was the
park.
Church of
Yeah.
Open Skies.
Oh, I thought that was just what it was called, but it was a Church of Open Skies because it actually didn't have a roof. It was a
Correct.
park.
And I
you
actually
could see the open sky.
Don't know whether he was a priest. So
Besides that, totally normal wedding.
So
He
Michel
used to
organised
really
it.
preach on, though. He was really thought he was,
So he married Michelle.
And he always had a big crowd because that is where they used to take the van to feed the homeless in the park. So he would preach. So the night of Michelle's wedding, and she just went ahead and organised it. And we're going, no, it was. But we all went, and all our relatives came to support. It was
She organised the wedding.
Oh,
What
yeah.
did she organise?
She'd bought a dress at Vinnie. She'd everything.
Had the white car. It was a white hole.
I honestly, when she's got a plan, she goes for it. And then after it, she said that the reception was planned at the minister's house. So we all went back to this house that was full of hundreds of dogs. And Pete and I went and bought some pizzas and brought them back. And that was our wedding.
And within 3 months, she decided she was done with that. But by then,
Yeah.
she was already pregnant.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you remember talking to her about the fact that she was pregnant and did she want to have the baby? Did she not? I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
awkward. You're a Catholic family. I don't want to
Yeah.
make any
She
inferences.
she's like a little girl that looks at Barbie dolls and weddings and babies. So the idea of it's all lovely, but she had no. And I don't know why, but I guess we really didn't think. Mum must have, because she did try to interfere with. But yeah,
Suggest that maybe there were other options.
yes.
How old is Michelle intellectually?
Supposedly about 9.
Right.
But in a lot of other ways, I guess she's more worldly, and she watches a lot of Home and Away, and she bases a lot of her decisions in her life about what she sees on television. And she loved Mills and Boon's book. That's her. So she likes the idea of being a
Of
bride.
weddings and
Yeah.
And so then, Pop, do you remember having conversations with your wife about what that would mean for the two of you, Michelle having a baby? Was she living out of home at that stage, or she was still living with you two?
She moved out when she married, and they had a flat somewhere, which she abandoned, of course, when she met somebody more exciting.
And she was pregnant to the first guy.
Yes,
But
yes.
you must have been concerned. Did you?
Oh, we were concerned. In fact,
Yeah.
so they went up. I had to go up to somewhere north of Brisbane to get her out of a caravan park. She'd gone with this fella. Broke her heart. She was really in love with this fella at the time, and it was terrible. I mean, she cried. And but you know very well that sooner or later she'd be booted out of the caravan, and there she'd be on her own.
Did you have family discussions about what you were all going to do with this baby when it was born?
I guess the thing here is because Michelle had a disability and her ex-husband, he clearly had a disability, but his mother never accepted it. So this poor kid's gone to a school, sat in the back, but clearly there was something wrong. So the problem is that the options were, if Michelle had a baby and the baby was put up for adoption, the baby would have to be fostered for a couple of years until it could be ascertained whether the baby had a disability, and there was a chance of that.
Really?
So Mum 100% said there is no grandchild of mine that's going to go 2 years in foster care, and then at the end of that, if there's something wrong, hope that some lovely family is going to take our grandchild and raise that child the way we want it to be raised. So for her, there was no decision. And the other thing deep in her heart, I guess she thought, imagine if this little baby really wanted with Michelle, and Michelle would have someone forever.
It's Jessie again. It's at this point I want to jump in and explain how we really wanted to hear how Michelle remembered this situation. So Mia decided to call her up and ask her about how she felt about giving birth to Simon. This is what she had to say.
Do you remember when you were pregnant with Simon? What was that like?
Oh, I was okay with him. I had a good pregnancy. I wasn't sick or anything, but I had a good pregnancy and had a natural birth with him. Yeah, it was good.
What was the birth like? Do you remember?
It was very painful, very painful. And then I had an epidural done, and to give birth to him, and he was about 8.5 pounds born.
He was a big baby. No wonder it hurt.
Yeah, he was a big baby.
Yeah.
A big boy. Yeah.
And
yeah.
what was he like when he was little? Do you remember much when he was a baby? Was it easy to look after a baby, or was it quite hard?
Oh well, it was a bit hard because he got a bit of autism a little bit in his life. But other than that, he was a pretty good baby. He slept a lot. He slept for 6 hours each time.
Oh, wow.
Each time in the feed. He was a really good baby. Yeah, very good baby.
So that was my auntie Michelle. She loved Simon, but she couldn't look after him. So my grandparents took him in.
The hospital actually assessed Michelle after the birth and said, well, she's not going to be able to look after him. So the alternative was that he either be a ward of the state or be adopted. And my wife said, no way, we'll take him. He's not going to be a ward of the state. So we'll bring him up.
But I was at the birth. I saw him
You
born.
were there?
Yeah. It's really
What
exciting.
was it like? What was Michelle like during the birth?
She was the only person they ever knew in labour that wanted food. She loves food. So she was hungry, and they said, you're going to have to hold on. And then it was amazing. I'd never seen a baby born, and he came out and he just looked perfect. And we're all looking at this wonderful baby, and it was Michelle that said, is it a boy or a girl? And then just named it on the spot. And then when Simon had his first bath, we just fell in love with him.
How was she with him straight away?
Oh, she was all right, but she wanted her sandwiches, and
It wasn't quite the same.
She liked the idea. She just
Yes, but not. It wasn't the sort of relationship that you normally saw with a mother and a new baby. You know,
she was curious.
Casual.
But, yeah.
Casual. And so did she need to be convinced that she couldn't take him home and look after him? Was that something she wanted to do?
By that stage, we had so much conversation that she would just be bringing Simon home, and that's what she did. So she lived with Mum and Dad and Simon for quite a bit, because when Simon was just a few months old, I think, Dad went to work for Singapore Airlines, so they moved to Singapore. So Michelle went to Singapore with Mum and Dad and Simon, and that was a great place for Michelle. And Simon was absolutely adored over there because he was very blue-eyed, blonde hair, very chubby. And so she'd be going down the street and Simon would get all this attention. So it was quite a nice time in their lives.
Did your mum sort of step in straight away to take the mother role, or did Michelle try to?
No, Mum, from the start. But when we were in Singapore with the unit, you had an armour, didn't you?
Yeah.
So Mum had some help around that, which she never would have ever accepted or had. So that was quite a nice time. And when they came back, I think Michelle moved on then, didn't she? She didn't stay home for long.
I'm just trying to recall what happened there.
I think she met her next husband.
She met somebody else.
Met Lenny.
Who was that?
Lenny.
How old was Simon then when she sort of moved out?
Two.
Oh, two.
When we were in Singapore for 2 years.
Yeah. And so you came back and then she met Lenny and did she marry Lenny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twice.
Pete, in the end, you married her a few times, didn't you? So tell me how that came about.
So because of when people get married, there's some issues when people get married and when they don't want to be married anymore.
What kind of issues?
Well, like divorce. Like there's paperwork.
Working out.
So as you know, I mean, Michelle liked the idea and she liked getting dressed up and having people over and making a fuss of her and all that sort of stuff. So marriage was a good thing. And look, it did bring the family together. I mean, it was a great day.
All our cousins would come. The beautiful
everybody
thing.
would come and
it was a party.
Yeah, it was a real.
And she was happy on that day, but
Yeah.
it became because what you and the family had to untangle all the
Correct.
paperwork of divorce and
Yeah.
marriage and divorce.
And then there's also the, like the family of the person that she's married, and that became difficult. So she met this fellow called Victor, and Victor was, she was in love with Victor, and she wanted to marry him. And I
But
said,
not really in love
well, she was in love
with the idea of
yeah.
Yeah.
She liked, she wanted another wedding, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How many had she already had?
Ron.
twice to Lenny, then Robert,
Oh, Robert.
and then that was it.
So she'd already had 4 husbands.
Yes.
Well, 3.
Well,
Because
3
she
was
was
one
She married
twice,
twice,
but
yeah.
getting complicated. So what happened with Victor?
So Victor, she wanted, and then his family was dead against it as we were. So I said to, and I told, well, it's probably bigger than a white lie. I said, look, since I'm an assistant principal at a school at the time, I can marry you like a ship's captain. That's a good idea. So
You're an official.
an official. So I work in a Catholic school, so I know about how to do a wedding. So I got some candles and lit the 3 candles and said, this represents love, and this represents hope, and this represents faith, and it was all nice. And I got a white shirt and I put it on backwards so it looked as though I had a collar, and I did this ceremony. So yeah, so then and Michelle was happy, and she thought she was married, and
she
Victor
didn't need
thought
to.
she married.
Yeah, and he didn't need to live with him. That wasn't.
Yeah.
She just wanted the wedding.
Yeah.
What happened to Victor?
She moved houses, and that was it.
Yeah.
She lived too far away,
And no, like there's no, she used to see him almost every day, but when it happened, that was just, she's gone, then we'll go to a new person. So she didn't feel sad or anything, did she?
no.
No, there was no broken-hearted about it. It was just, I'll move on sort of thing.
But I was just going to say one thing that might be of interest is, like, there was one fellow that she met that did not have a disability, and he lived on the streets, and he went out with Michelle, and all he wanted to do was collect her pension check. And at this stage she was set up in her own unit, and he just crashed, and we couldn't get rid of him. And he would come to us and say, I've got complete control here, so don't even bother. So that got a bit scary. We had to go to the police about that. But just back to after Michelle had Simon, she did have a tubes tie because she didn't enjoy the pain, so she agreed to that. When she was with this homeless guy, he figured out that if they had a baby, he'd get more money. And so he had arranged for Michelle to
She'd get a single parent.
Yeah, for that operation to be reversed. So I was pregnant with my second child, and I rang the doctor doing the operation, and I said, look, the fact is she's allowed to be pregnant, but she's not allowed to keep the baby. I said, Mum and Dad are now in their 70s. I said, so realistically, if this baby's born, it's going to be my baby. And so could I have some decision-making around you reversing this? And I gave the reason why this guy wanted Michelle to have the child. And the doctor said, I 100% sympathise with you. And he said, all I can do is talk to her. He said, but I've actually got no right to not do it.
If she wants it done.
That's right. But in the meantime, this guy got out of hand. We were able to get police assistance, and thank goodness that all went away.
How vulnerable she was.
Yes, really vulnerable.
When did it become clear that Simon also had a disability?
So Mum picked it up within the first few months. So we knew easily within a year.
What are his disabilities, Lisa?
He's got dyspraxia, so that it's not automatic, his speech out his mouth.
So he can think thoughts, but he can't
just doesn't naturally come out.
Express them.
Yeah, and he's got an intellectual disability, so like he can sort of write his name, but he was never going to be able to read or write. He's actually surprised us though. He seems to continually be learning, and at 7 he didn't talk, but you can see he's got vocabulary now, and the longer you're with him, the more it makes sense. So he continues to learn and surprise us.
Well, because he became a celebrity when he was about 7. So Simon was into routine. So Mum would give him 10 cents or whatever to buy the paper from the paper boy, the local paper boy, who had his little cart there. And then Simon would always want to blow his whistle, but he couldn't blow the whistle. So one day the fella gave him the whistle, and Simon blew the whistle, And from that day on, he could speak, he could say, he could make some noises. And so the newspapers got hold of it, and then he ended up being on the Ray Martin show and all that sort of stuff, you know, The Boy and His Whistle. And so Simon was there, and so that was that coincided with the day that he could start utter some.
I mean, he'd had lots of speech therapy, but
Yeah.
it helped with. But I think the thing about that was this beautiful 13, 14-year-old boy that used to and Simon would slobber all
There
over
were
the
two
whistle.
of them, they were brothers.
Yeah, and the fact that these young boys with no experience just befriended Simon, and it got to the media, I think, because Mum rang the mother and said, your boys are exceptional, and this mother told her brother who just rang the local paper, and then it just went from Alan Jones and it went to Ray Martin, and they were all on the Ray Martin show, and Ray Martin gave him a harmonica. And
Oh, wow.
but I think it was just it was great for it was great too, I suppose, because you're acknowledging that there's some beautiful young people out there, and sometimes we underestimate what some of
The
our young
kindness.
people. Yes.
Pete and Elissa, by this stage, you were adults, you had your own families, and your parents were about to retire. Michelle had moved out of home, she was living independently, many times married. How did it feel for you guys to see them thrown back into starting all over again with this baby who also had a disability, and it was even more significant than your older sisters?
Look, it was probably some conversations that were going behind Mum and Dad's back, not from us, but from other people. But there was never, ever, ever any discussion about any other way that it was going to happen. We were going to do that. There was nothing about, oh, well, this is going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, it's going to ruin our retirement. Never, ever a word.
What about that they were just physically too old? I mean, with all due respect,
Yeah.
Pops are hale and hearty 94.
Yeah. So that came up, and Mum was always thinking about next steps, about when we do get too old, where he's going to go. We'll get a home, and before she died, she was doing that. With all due respect, Dad was against it. I think he didn't want Simon to leave, but Mum had sort of thought, well, you can't look after him forever. So she was making inquiries about places he could go, and she actually visited those places. But she always made it quite clear that Simon would never be our responsibility.
Was that a concern?
Her thing was, he will outlive you all, and then what? So if you don't make him, if we don't set him up and you're all gone, then what? And it was our decision. And where he went to school to, that was their advice when he was leaving school. They very much suggested that we should set him up independently. But when Mum was dying, and I should go back, raising him, Mum embraced everything, so did Dad. So she made so many friends. She was on the PNC. She was doing the fates and all of that. So they met a lot of wonderful people through Simon, and I think until you have a child with a disability, I guess you don't know that there's a whole other world out there, and they're lovely. And if they're embraced and they embrace you. So there was a lot of joy there that perhaps some of their other friends that didn't, had well passed and were doing all their fancy trips and everything. But in the end, you think at the core of it, they've got Simon, and it was so much more than any trip or anything else would bring, I guess.
When COVID happened, what was the decision-making around Michelle and Simon and what was going to happen?
Well, COVID didn't affect. So the homes, they put the rules on. So they said, you're not going anywhere. It was a state rule, I thought, state law.
Simon was already in the group situation, but he used to come home every weekend.
Yes.
And that's what, it just stopped it, and it was no decision because it was a law.
Because that was the law.
Yeah.
So anyone in those group homes were locked down and locked in those homes.
That's right.
So what was that like for Simon, and what was it like for you, Pop?
Well, Simon got used to it, strangely enough. And, I missed him. I'd like to have him at home, but I knew that he had to be in a group home. There was no other way. And kids couldn't take him, and, they're going to get old as well anyway, but they've got their own. So I knew, but I hung on to him for a while.
This is before COVID. You didn't want him to go into a home at all?
No, because I never moved houses. My home, I moved out when I was 19, but Simon, he knows a few things, and he used to quietly tell me over the years, every now and again, that where we were living was his home. He'd just say, "This is my home."
And he still says that, but
Yeah.
the problem is he's so vulnerable and he's not safe, and he wanders.
Because he likes to go walking, doesn't he?
And he used to get on trains, and we're not sure of things, and that's the hard thing, because there's a few times we think something happened, and we've even got police involved, but he can't communicate. And apart from that, he won't tell you. Even he doesn't
right, he
tell you
won't.
if there's anything wrong. And so there were some huge concerns of some incidents. So he really does need to be supervised all the time. But like Dad's got, and I understand with Dad, because Dad said we don't want him locked up and we want him to have his freedom, and he loves his train trips and he likes to sit in his own seat. So while you want him to have all that, you can't give it to him, and it's so hard. And I know Dad really struggles with that, don't you, Dad?
Well,
Yeah.
well, if I'd let him know it can't happen, but he always wanted to go somewhere, and I had, I got pretty cheap airfares, and we'd drive. So every year we went somewhere. We used to go to Adelaide a fair bit because all my folks are over there, or what's left of them. And then last year before, he decided he wanted to go to Perth. I don't know why he wanted to go to Perth. He'd never been to Perth or heard about it.
So you went to Perth?
We went to Perth for a week, yeah.
What do you do when you're at home together, you and Simon?
He does his own thing and I do mine, and we fight.
Don't you have birds?
Yes,
the magpies?
They come along. We feed them.
Yeah.
But we've got a bit of a problem at the moment. There's half a dozen kookaburras turned up. And
The birds got around.
they take the food off the magpies. So I've got to supervise I've got to chase the kookaburras away from them.
He loves being at home. I know
He likes that. Well, the maggies come right up to you and put their heads up and start squawking. They want to be fed.
When you have family, reunions and occasions, what's the interaction like between Michelle and Simon? Do they know that they're mother and son? And do they sort of behave like mother and son in any way?
No.
There's nothing there. They'll say hello, and Michelle, because as we talked about the idea of being a mother, so we will go to take them out, and she'll say, "This is my son, Simon." But there's no. I don't think I've ever seen them hug or kiss each other, or there's no affection.
way. And Simon just calls her Michelle anyway.
Well, he calls her mum, but when and this is especially in the early days, because she's got a bit of a temper, so if she was having a temper tantrum, then he'd call her Michelle, and he'd just say, "Peace, peace."
Peace. What have you learnt as siblings of someone with a disability and now, an aunt and uncle? It's so woven through your life and through your family. What do most people not realise about people with disabilities?
It teaches you about what matters. So they tell you quite clearly what matters. And what matters is people, relationships, honesty. Like Simon will say hello to everybody. He'll go out and he's got no problems of doing that. And when he likes something, he says and gets very excited. So that whole passion. And the same as Michelle, they're not concerned about what other people think of them. They are who they are. So for me, in my profession, I'm a teacher, and I work with kids that have got special needs, and I've got kids that haven't got special needs but got problems in their lives. And it makes me appreciate, first of all, it made me appreciate, the things that I've got. But it also, as a teacher, about the importance of honesty. And I think even with my kids, I'm not sure when they were younger, but, I see Claire and Jessie now, not so much my sons, but Claire and Jessie, taking Michelle out and taking Simon out, I don't know whether if I was 30, that I would do that. I mean, and somehow they've learnt this. They don't care either. They can see the importance, and they enjoy their honesty and I suppose they can understand that they're vulnerable, and there's no crap about them. There's no crap about Simon or Michelle. They tell you what they want. And the other, and same as my boys, I would have to say that with the boys, they don't spend so much time with them. But I think because they've seen Michel and Simon and the way that we deal with them, I think that's probably why they've got into professions where they care about kids, and they're very, they're both primary school teachers, and they're always talking about strategies to help kids. So it is. It's something that it's part of who I am. I think just being comfortable on being honest.
I suppose one thing I think people need to be aware of is that often they don't, if like Simon can't speak properly or Michel gets cranky, people assume that they don't know what's going on. And we've seen it, like they internalise it, but they do understand what's going on and they do feel. But I think...
Do you mean like when people are condescending to them or act like they can't hear or can't understand?
They get it.
Yeah.
And I remember I remember Michel being teased by boys across the road, but Mum was great because she taught us, if you see it happening, just go up and say, you've got a really good opportunity here, and explain it and be honest and say they've got a disability and this is how you can help them, and start to educate people. And I thought that was a good way to approach it. And honestly, I think they've brought the best out in our family. Like Pete's kids, you know them, they're beautiful. My kids, they're all empathetic. They all get it. And then, say, Simon, my boys played a bit of AFL, and Simon would come to the games and he started working in the canteen, and the AFL community just embraced him. And my son's was 15 at the time, one of them, Paddy, and his friends used to take Simon on. And I just thought he just brought so much to that community, and they do bring out the best in people, because people want to be nice and people feel good when they do the right thing. And so I just couldn't imagine our family without them, really.
Thank you for listening to my family's story, and a big thank you to Mia for sharing it. Hopefully a lot of you can relate to some of those experience, and it might be eye-opening to some who have not been touched directly or have never maybe met someone with an intellectual disability. It's interesting because every time I speak about Michel and Simon on the Mamamia Out Loud podcast or post on social, I get lots of messages from people who, have a cousin that reminds them of Simon, or a daughter or a son or an auntie. And I think that this is hopefully a step towards ensuring that those stories are shared more widely, because families all look very different, and I'm grateful every day for the way my family looks. This episode was produced by Mel Zauer. The assistant producer of No Filter is Lucy Neville. The executive producer is Eliza Ratliff. Your host was Mia Friedman, and I'm Jessie Stevens. Thank you for listening.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.